Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of VCTV. I'm your host, Kyle Ellicott, and we are here to break down the conversation around sustainability and really what we are looking to do to transition our entire society globally to a more sustainable life, world, and bioeconomy as well. What does that all mean? Where should we be looking at as investors? Where should we be thinking about building as entrepreneurs? These are some of the questions we're going to dive into as we've brought together best and the brightest of the VCTV family who focuses on this area every single day to share their thoughts and insights and on the ground perspective with each and every one of you. And as we've done in previous episodes recently, the comments box is open. If you've got questions, comments, you just want to say hi, drop something in there. We'd be happy to hear from you. We'll do our best to ask them in real time, the questions that you may provide. If not, we're all available afterwards for further conversation. Big thank you to the LaToken team and to Maria for making today's episode of VCTV possible. And make sure you check out the archive after today's episode on latoken.com to hear more from today's speakers and all speakers of the VCTV family. With that, I'm your host, Kyle Ellicott. Let's jump in. We got some good guests. Let's get them introduced. Keith, welcome back to the show. A little intro, a little background for everybody.
Hey, that's great, Kyle. Thank you very much. Great to be here. Great to see Ragu again. And this topic is near and dear to my heart. My background, 20 years as a clean tech VC. Included in there, I was president of BASF Venture Capital America, where I got very excited about green and white, or some people say gray, biotechnology. Green biotechnology being the biotech that is focused on the agricultural world, and the white or gray biotechnology being the industrial biotech, the manufacturing of goods and chemicals or other inputs through biological means rather than through pure synthetic or other non-synthetic chemistry. Very excited about the possibilities here, but also very aware of the difficulties in scaling these technologies.
And I'm excited to get into that because one of the things that I think we tend to skip over when we discuss sustainability or bio in general is that scalability angle. We talk about the improvements, talk about the opportunities, but scaling bio, but more importantly, bioeconomies. This is something that I don't feel is not talked about at all. So we're going to come back to that. Thank you, Keith. Ragu, welcome back to the show. A little intro, a little background.
Hi, I'm Ragu Rao from Princeton, New Jersey. Thank you, Kyle and LaToken. I really enjoy these VCTV sessions. My background is as an angel investor, strategic advisor, and a serial entrepreneur. The entrepreneurship was originally in the web, and then went into homeland security areas. And most recently, last 3-4 years, I've been focusing on impact investments in biotech, clean tech, and of course, all the decentralized data security areas. And I think the sustainability aspect is extremely important, as the pandemic showed us, and hopefully the pandemic created some awareness of how important this is. And I think we are at a good point after the singularity to really take this momentum and get a lot deeper into these areas, sustainability, especially circular economy, things like energy efficiency, plant-based foods, and then of course just being able to meter things, measure how we're doing, because that's been one of the challenges. I mean, it's all great to have a EV, but how is the total footprint in terms of carbon footprint, not just like operational, but what happens when you build it, what happens when you dump it, right? So those things have to be taken into account as well.
Well, and having a plan, right? I mean, we've had the ability to measure some of these things for years, but what's been the plan and acting upon that plan for us as individuals, but globally as well? You bring it up, Ragu, that 2020, and Keith mentioned this as well in his statement, is 2020 showed us a lot of where things have gone wrong in terms of sustainability of our climate, to just the sustainability of how we live our lives and what we do or what we don't do as well. And there's so much to be had, but it starts with a plan. and then acting on that plan and continuing to adjust that plan as well. So to your point, just because you drive an electric vehicle, what is the impact that it has? And is that really a part of this, bioeconomy, the sustainability effort that we're all moving towards? So I completely agree with you, and we're going to be talking about that. But Keith, start us out. What is a bioeconomy? For those who may be tuning in for the first time, what does that even mean? And then it being sustainable. Again, what does that topic of today mean for you?
Sure. I mean, it can be interpreted a lot of different ways, but for me,
your interpretation.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, the bioeconomy here is the production or the improved production of goods and or services through biological means, and it carries through into a wide range of industries, but is perhaps easiest to understand in the agricultural space, where we are used to, and through much of human history, we're used to a bioeconomy. We're used to growing wood, harvesting wood. Actually, we're just used to harvesting wood. We didn't used to plant it. We just went out there and took it from nature. And then we would build things with it, right? Or we would plant crops, and even before that, we didn't plant crops either. That was a sustainability innovation. That was the agrarian revolution, and now we are seeing that sustainable production of the inputs that we're dependent on is dependent on us doing more things to plant and not just harvest. Just like we did with the agrarian revolution a few thousand years ago, we are now reaching that for other inputs. In between, we had a period of time where we, especially in the 20th century, where we were making a lot of things through synthetic chemistry, which is great. It's wonderful. It's miraculous, the characteristics of the material properties you can get out of synthetic chemistry. But sustainability is one of those areas. Again, we weren't sensitive to it 100 years ago when plastics started their explosion, and certainly in the second half of the 20th century, where plastics ended up in everything and everywhere all over the planet. They're wonderful, wonderful chemicals. They have incredible properties, but sustainability is difficult. Now, on the coming back to the bioeconomy side of that, we are now seeing ways that we can produce biologically compounds that have similar, or in some cases novel and maybe more appropriate material properties, and that have nice end-of-life issues. So coming to the sustainability issue. And that's, for me, the interesting thing here, where those things come together, where we can have biological processes for production of products or input materials, and we can have sustainability from the sourcing of the inputs to do that biological process through end of life. Can we easily recycle these things, or do they break down into benign compounds that don't harm our environment?
Ragu, anything to add on to that? I think Keith's making some. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, tough act to follow. That is very nicely done, Keith. And see, I look at things that are obviously reducing or replacing plastic. One recent example of a company that's working on skin grafts using placental material, right? So placenta anyway goes gets dumped, and it's a hazardous bio waste, but at least it's biodegradable. But what they are doing before, a lot of these skin grafts used to be, and they used to use a plastic backing, for instance. So they create a lot of waste. You have to go in twice, once to kind of install it, once to peel it off, things like that. So there are, when you look at it, I think there are very, very elegant solutions, just avoiding the use of plastic. It's very hard because, as Keith was saying, we got so enamored by this, we have started using it too many things, and it's just gone out of control, right? Because we don't know how to reduce the consumption now. And so I think that is part of it is educational. Obviously, government can incentivize some of these things. I think the other thing is in the energy space, how we can use nuclear energy is still I mean, from a large scale energy generation, it's still the most efficient and clean. Although, it has, the nuclear waste part, which, they are able to recycle most of it. 98% is recyclable. The 2%, they have to figure out how to make it more efficient in terms of getting recycling. And that will happen soon. And the modular nuclear reactors, if you bring in, it will reduce the danger that we have with large reactors. So I think there are some ways that we can adjust our energy generation. And then the bigger picture is the use of materials, right, like plastics and all that, and also food is another huge factor in terms of how we can make it sustainable. A lot of plant-based foods are now coming in, imitation meat and things like that, which are widely adopted now. I think that will actually have a very big impact on the carbon footprint. If we can get rid of the whole factory-based farming, whether it's meat industry or dairy industry, I think they're huge contributors. And then, of course, the transportation, I'm still not totally clear with the EVs. I think maybe hydrogen will change the mix, but I think the electric EVs, still the generation is not totally clean. A lot of the generation is
And
coming.
I definitely don't see it being part of the bioeconomy.
Yeah, that is-
Biofuels for that application, I just don't buy it.
Yep.
Why
And
not? Wait,
Yeah, go
hold, real quick, Ragu. Why not, Keith? I feel like you've got a statement there. Why are biofuels not necessarily a part of that bioeconomy that we're painting right now?
Well, no, and they are a part of the bioeconomy. But as to the application that Ragu was speaking about there for going into vehicles, especially personal vehicles or fleet vehicles, I don't think biofuels are going to be any significant part of that because of scalability issues and logistics. You can have applications that are very local where you have a lot of, let's say, bagasse or some other biomaterial input that can be economically converted into a biofuel. And you could have refueling right there. This could be in an agricultural large site, something like that, where it has to be large enough that you can service enough vehicles right there locally without needing to store and transport the fuel. But there's going to be very few places like that where it's really economic to use biofuels. It's that storage and transportation that really kill it. It took a long time for the petroleum industry to get to a point where they could store and transport gasoline and diesel to be available at all the corner gas stations that we used to have and we have less of now. I don't know what things are like in Princeton, but certainly I know here on the West Coast where we have fewer and fewer gas stations. But the logistics in the mid-20th century were such that you could put one up every few blocks in a town, and there was enough demand, and it was cheap enough to do that. I don't think that's going to be the case with biofuels anytime soon, especially because of the cost of transporting the input materials to the processing station.
Yeah, I think like electrical grids again. I mean, are efficient at transportation. The issue there is that the generation, as well as what happens to all this waste from the EVs, the battery parts, and it's like huge amount of toxic waste that still that's not really figured out how to recycle them. At the level that they need to be, because if everything is going electric, we're going to have a lot of waste, and that's going to dump computer waste, for instance. I mean, computers.
So that is the waste part is one place where the bioeconomy can come into play. There are microorganisms in nature that do eat particular plastics, but also metals and some binding agents. And we have seen how you can use, these are mostly anaerobic, by the way. These are organisms from deep in the earth for whom oxygen is a poison. They work great in a landfill once you get down a meter or two. but these kind of organisms can be harnessed to separate out the precious metals to recover, for example, lithium. Um, these have been used in mining for leaching for a century. Especially, I'm thinking in South Africa, where they really developed the commercial use of these bacteria to help separate and purify pure precious metals from ore. So there is a role at the end of life for biology in this application. But generally speaking, I believe that the electrification of the grid and of transportation is not going to overlap significantly with the bioeconomy.
And Keith, I want to circle back real quick on scalability. Both you and Ragu are making great points here, but coming back to scalability, I mean, how do we scale any of this technology that we're looking at investing or building in right now? I mean, even Ragu mentioned a few points, and around alternative foods, energy grids, et cetera. I mean, these are core industries that have been in place for hundreds or thousands of years, which sounds crazy to say, but is very true. And how do we go and replace those? And how do we scale them? I mean, even just thinking of alternative foods, I mean, we're just starting to see a minor amount of scale in that process. And it's a couple years in, and really probably more like 10 years in at this point at mass. So talk to us a little bit about what you're seeing around scalability in this new bioeconomy and the companies surrounding it.
Okay, well, and I think your question provides some focus to my answer there, which is helpful because there's a lot to talk about. Most of the processes that I've seen, biological processes here, are done in fermentation. And most of that, of course, is liquid fermentation. You're essentially brewing beer. And that's how most of the companies I've dealt with refer to it. They call it their beer. In these cases, most cases, you have the organisms making something other than alcohol. Although for biofuels, it's alcohol. But for other things, you have either natural or GMO yeast or E. coli or other organism that is expressing your desired molecule, which hopefully you can scale up initially, starting with like a test tube, and then to a 2-liter beaker, and in between you get to 750 liters. If you can get to 750 liters, then you probably have something that scales from there. That's the place where a lot of these things fall apart. To come to your question specifically around alternative foods, one of my companies is Calista out of California, Claysta. Calista make edible protein from natural gas. And so why is that bioeconomy? Well, it's not just because natural gas is from decomposed organisms that died, millions of years ago. But they use a naturally occurring bacterium that eats that methane, and it produces a pure protein as its waste product. Now, this is the exact same protein that we all get out of animal meat. It's an animal protein. But it's coming through a pure biological process, and not just a processing of eating other organisms that ate other organisms before that. Those ones ate other organisms. The circle of life, we're not talking about that here. These guys just have a pure metabolic pathway to take CH4 and their other inputs, CO2, whatever is in the gases around them, because this is a gaseous fermentation process, not a liquid one. And they produce this nice, complex, beautifully folded protein, which the company is already selling into the aquaculture industry. Has all kinds of advantages there, because not only is it the same protein that you would get out of fish meal or some other animal protein you're feeding to the fish, but because it's done through a pure process, there's none of the disease that is in other fish or other animal populations. There's no bacterium, there's no viruses. It's just this pure protein. And the company is going into pet foods and human foods. I mean, it's the same proteins, it's the same molecules that we all eat in animal meats or other, even the alternative crickets or whatever you want to have. It's the same kind of animal proteins. But in this case, it is very purely derived through a biological process, quite different than the way we normally get our animal protein. The issue there is scale. Gaseous fermentation has been around for a long time. On the Sasol, again, going back to South Africa, they pioneered a lot of the work in this, given how they were, a lot of the world would not trade with them during the days of apartheid, and they made great innovations in chemistry there. So gaseous fermentation has been around for a long time. These organisms like to live in a gaseous state and not swimming around in water or some other liquid. It's a very different way to do things. And while liquid fermentation has been scaled up, of course, that's how beer, in the sense that we all think of it, is made, as well as wine and biofuels, for goodness sakes. It's all done that way. Gaseous fermentation scaling up has really only been done in a few applications. So that's something that the company really faced as a challenge. And when they did their large proof of concept installation at Teesside in the UK, that was the first time to really demonstrate this stuff at scale. Now the company is working on a much larger installation, which should drive down costs to the point where it will work for human consumption, because we don't like to spend a lot on our food.
Great point. Say, Ragu, anything to add on to that, or anything in general to add on to scaling around all this?
Yeah, I can take a different look at scaling. Keith is the expert on the manufacturing aspect, as you can see. I think the other part of scaling is how we can do things, in a more optimized fashion, right? And that's where technology comes in. And again, AI is an enabling technology there. How to find the best type of ingredients and the optimal mixes and things like that. I think in biofuels there is a lot of activity going on in that. I am actually advising a company that's basically using everything. It's creating energy crops as input, the feedstock, and also waste materials like used cooking oil, brown grease, lots of very bad stuff that goes into landfill is used as raw material. And then they have figured out a way to, in addition to the biodiesel, some of the byproducts that come out like glycerine and stuff are actually recycled. Right now, a lot of that is again dumped. So I think the whole idea is how can every piece of the that cycle you make it, you need to look at the overall sustainability, as well as in every piece, if there is, we want to reduce the waste products and use them where we can. See, part of this is if those are not large enough for scaling, they just kind of, people ignore it. They think that it's not big enough on an individual plant level, but if you kind of add up everything that's happening, it is pretty big. And there's multiple industries that are doing similar things. It's kind of like looking at the electric power industry dumps radioactive fly ash, but you don't hold it to the same standard as nuclear, because nuclear is held to a different standard. But if you look at the amount of radiation exposure that it's caused by other industries too, it's not just nuclear. So that's what I think we have to kind of look at more the smaller things that kind of add up very quickly. And that is, I think, important, because at scale we are doing a lot of things, but we are not necessarily paying attention to these circular economy type issues in terms of efficiency. I think that's another way to help with scaling up of the sustainability aspect.
And so with that being said, I mean, where do we go from here? So looking at the end of VCTV's episode today, as investors, as entrepreneurs, where do we start focusing our time and efforts either as investments, so laying down investments, or starting to build towards a more sustainable bioeconomy? Ragu, to you.
Yeah, I look at three areas. One is obviously biofuels, which are efficient in terms of doing recycling as well as creating biofuels. Both. The second area is energy efficiency, and the third area is plant-based foods, because I'm a vegan as well. So it's goes right with my basic belief system. So I'm looking at all those. I think the circular economy is very much needed because we have created so much plastic already while we transition to these other sustainable methods.
Keith, to you.
So yeah, Ragu and I think we have similar values. Although I'm not a vegan, but otherwise really love what he has to say. So on that topic, I was speaking on a clubhouse earlier today on corporate spinouts. And I've recently reconnected with a spinout coming out of IBM, of all places. I have talked about it on this show, but now there's some things that are public that I can actually reveal. The name of this company is called Volcat, because they have a voltage triggered catalyst. Anyway, I'm very excited about this because you can take post-consumer fibers without sorting them or without cleaning them, and that's a key thing here around cost, and just dump them in this soup, and this low energy process separates it into virgin monomers, and these pure, clean carbon fibers, not carbon fibers, cotton fibers, just drop right out of it as well, without needing to sort or clean, which is a huge part of the cost of the end of life, the recycling issues around these very mixed fabrics. I'm very excited about that. It's not a biological process, but it does allow us to take those synthetic and biological inputs and purify them in a very low cost and very scalable way. So that has now been spun out from IBM. It is a separate company. There's a couple of other corporates. Those I don't think have been publicly announced, but the actual work going on at Volcat is something that you can Google and take a closer look at. I'm not invested in the company, but I'm very excited about what they're doing.
Wonderful. And Keith, or actually Ragu, pardon me, any closing thoughts, and where can everyone find you online to continue the conversation as we come to close here just before the top of the hour?
I'm LinkedIn is the best way to reach me. I'm Ragu Rao on LinkedIn, and from VCTV as well. I'm getting many calls now, and WhatsApp. I'm still on WhatsApp, although I tried to move to Signal, but not everybody is moving, so I'm still sticking on that. So I think the sustainability and the bioeconomy. In fact, I'm dealing with a company called Bioeconomy, which is in energy crops, and so I think the energy crops is a good way, especially in, for instance, these guys are in the Native American lands, and so there's a lot of things that can be done. First, reduce the use of plastic, recycle it, and then we figure out ways to do it in a more sustainable way. So I think with the pandemic now, the awareness has come. There's going to be hopefully a lot of investment coming in, both from the public and private sector. So,
Keith.
Great. Yeah, I think there is a lot of investment going on in this area. And this is sort of peak CVC. We've never seen more corporate venture capital going on at any point in history. So, yeah, there's a lot of money here. And the strategic benefits to these sustainable processes, biological or otherwise, for corporates is very clear. There's a clear economic argument to be made for maybe not all of these technologies, but for many of them. And getting corporates to invest either through partnership, through non-recurring engineering fees, NREs, or through direct equity investment. This is happening right now more than ever before. There's an economic driver behind this, but there's also a positioning driver here. I think that companies that are not run in a sustainable manner and cannot prove it will be under more and more pressure from their customers to change their ways, or their competitors will get that business. So I'm seeing more and more of that. There's a lot of interest from the corporates to invest here. Certainly, there's been a lot of interest from the corporates in my companies coming in to lead further rounds, and that's great. I come from that background. I love working with the corporates. But these days, I am now running a new private equity firm called Upper Stage Ventures. And we're acquiring more a little later stage companies, $5 to $25 million revenue range, and then engaging our network to help those companies reach their larger international market. So you can follow me on LinkedIn or on Twitter at Keith A. Gillard. And my firm website's still very stealthy, but upperstage.ventures.
Wonderful. Ragu, Keith, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts and insights. And to our audience, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for all the great comments, and hello to everybody as well. It's just been nonstop over here throughout today's conversation, but thank you all for tuning in. If you'd like to be on a show like today's with Keith and Ragu and other members of the VCTV family, please do reach out. We'd love to have you. And a big thank you to the Latoken team, along with Maria, for making today's episode of VCTV possible. I'm your host, Kyle Ellicott. You can find myself along with Keith and Ragu on all social media platforms, and we look forward to hearing from you. So please do reach out. Make sure you add context, where you heard us, where you met us, what you would like to continue the conversation about. With that, we're going to be taking a break, and we'll be back here with more VCTV tomorrow. We look forward to seeing you then. Everyone have a wonderful day. Bye.
Cheers.